And joining us, our guest. We are in the committee room for the manager's report. So fortunately, the manager is before us to give us a report with respect to the long-range plan update. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. We are here for a long-range plan update. You may recall that this council put together a long-range plan affecting 2015 to 2017 and beyond. We did that last summer. As is our tradition, we revisit and update the plan the summer following that, just to refresh it and really to look at identifying and discussing issues that will affect us in the coming years in a material manner, and items which may show up as part of our fiscal year budgeting discussion. So items, in this case, that may be presented and become an issue in the proposed FY17 budget. Earlier tonight, you heard the mayor talk about updating our priorities for the long-range plan, our work plan, if you will. You may recall that back in the middle of May, that discussion took place, and we did make some updates to our priorities as far as our work plan, and you can find those updates on our website. Tonight, we've identified two issues for discussion that may affect us, particularly in the next year's budget and beyond. One is issues related to pressures on the property tax levy. The second are issues related to the cost of public safety pensions and other post-employment benefits, known as OPEB. So what I'd first like to do is just outline some of the issues that we now see forming related to the property tax levy. Three things that may cause the tax levy to increase in 2017 and or 2018. The first is required contributions to our public safety pensions, the pensions that support our retired police and firefighters. The bottom line on the tax impact for these required contributions is somewhere between $800,000 and $1.3 million worth of increase that could take place over the next 2 years. We do know for sure that in 2017, our annual contribution will increase by about $500,000. That is required under state law, and that's based on the actuarial reports. We further learned, in speaking with the actuaries that prepare those reports, that we can expect a $300,000 a year increase in our required contributions as the plan is working and all the assumptions in that plan are followed. So the annual increase is expected to be about $300,000. There is one other potential for an increase in the required contributions in this area, and that is if the fire pension board and or the police pension boards vote to change their assumption in their actuarial model on the rate of return of their investments. If they vote to reduce that rate of return in the model by 0.25%, then if they both do it, that could be another $500,000 increase in our required contribution. So those are the three reasons that public safety pension contributions as required by law could increase between $800,000 and $1.3 million in the next 2 years.
David, could you remind us about the police and fire pension boards?
Yes.
What they are and why they, can we control them,
Right.
etc.?
Police and fire pension boards consist of 5 individuals. They are the stewards of the public safety pensions, the police pension fund, the fire pension fund. They are autonomous, and they are the fiduciaries for those funds. So we do not have any direct control. I'm happy to say that we work very well with our police and fire pension board members and have enjoyed a strong and effective working relationship. But they are autonomous.
Thank you.
The second issue is really a shift in tax dollars that will show up as an increase on the village side, but there is a corresponding decrease in the library tax levy. And that is the levy for our planned police station improvements of about $600,000 a year. This is the tax revenue that would support the issuance of the bonds that would pay for the improvements to the police station. That levy would start probably in 2018, and by that time there would be a fully offset elimination of the levy that has been on the books for the library, paying off the improvements to the library that were made in the mid-1990s. That levy was about $620,000. That levy would go away and would be replaced by the levy for the police station improvements. So it would show up as an increase when you look only at the village, but on the broader perspective of your entire tax bill, it would be offset, a wash. The third issue that could affect our tax levy in the future is the whatever decision this council makes on stormwater utility, and how we generate revenue for that, those sets of activities, including operations and maintenance and capital. You may recall from our stormwater utility discussions that the council has authorized and directed us to have $3.9 million worth of revenue dedicated to needed stormwater maintenance and improvements for next year. The question is, will this remain entirely on a fee-based system, or will it shift all the way over to putting that $3.9 million in the property taxes, or anywhere in between? And that's a decision that this council will make in November or December of this year. So we just wanted to put together all of these three things that are affecting the future property tax levy, and we have summarized them here on the board, showing how the levy could move, both in a best case and worst case scenario, on these three line items. And I won't repeat what's here on the table. Just focus your attention on the impact to a typical house. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and really interested in hearing any council and community discussion on this item.
Thank you, Dave. Plainly, there's an awful lot of stuff on the left side of that board, and I think it's starting to tilt. And I'm concerned about trying to manage it, or obviously there's things on the right side of the board we haven't talked about. But how we manage the situation, because unfortunately we're dealing with two different buckets. We're dealing with things that we have control over, and then there's things we don't have control over. Unless there's public safety employee pension reform of some sort, we're not going to be able to do a whole lot about that first bullet point. We can do things about the second one, but that's pretty much something we've worked through pretty extensively. And I've heard every single one of us say that it is something we must do, which is go forward with the police station improvements. No one's backing out of that now. The thing that concerns me, if we're going to add more onto that through something that is also within our control, and not, with all due respect, not something I consider to be urgent. I understand that there's strong views of addressing that, but there's no magic that it has to be done this year as opposed to another year. When we're facing some of these other potential thumbs on the scale of the property tax for the homeowners, I would be very reluctant to take that step now and add another thumb on that scale when we don't have to, unless there are suggestions from things on the right side or elsewhere as to how to offset it or otherwise adjust it. I do realize also that some of that might be driven by answers we get to some questions that we're talking about putting out there. But that may be another reason not to have an impact that would overlap with the maybe the same time frame as the first two bullet points. But that's the one thing I have a concern about. And I'll stop talking and allow others to weigh in. Phil?
I'm going to work backwards. With the stormwater, either we're taking money from the residents out of their right pocket or their left pocket, and we've decided that we're going to put the question to them. So if it would become a tax increase, it's really upon their vote what they would prefer to see. It's not a good choice. You know, it's going to cost them either way, but at least that part of it's their choice.
Except, not to interrupt, but the rest of that, those other two bullet points aren't going to be on a referendum question.
Well, I'm working back. Okay, the second issue with the village hall, yes, we agreed to move ahead with that, and that's one of the options that we've taken. And then we get to the first one, which the average person, when they turn on the TV and they hear about all the fun that's going on in Springfield and things getting tossed back and forth, and people hear the word pensions, they kind of throw up their hands because they don't fully understand it, but they know it's a problem. And they don't know what Springfield has been doing for the last number of years. They've been borrowing from the pension fund, they've been underfunding, they've been doing all kinds of things with the pension fund, and now they're in a mess. And I think I commend staff for presenting this 6-page presentation, and they explain the pension, which if everybody would, every resident would look at it, would not only understand our challenges with the pension, but they'd also understand a little better what's going on in Springfield and why it's such a mess there. I look at the first section. It says the levy for the public safety pensions. It says will increase by $500,000 in 2017, approximately $300,000 thereafter, to make the required contributions pursuant to state law. It's not our fault. It's state law. This is a rock and a hard place. This is the rock that Springfield has thrown. The second part is may increase up to $500,000 for the next year if the police pension board changes and the fire pension board changes their assumed rate of return. What we've had as a history is they would project a certain rate of return. If they did well, in other words, if their version of the stock market or other investments, and they're not, this isn't totally stock market related, it's bonds and all kinds of complicated things, but when they've done well, we've lowered taxes appropriately. When they've done poorly, we have to raise taxes because we have to pay the bill. The bill has to be paid. So the idea that they're going to lower the rate of return, I mean, to 7.2%, I think a lot of people are out there looking for 7.2% or 7.5%. They could make us all happy and assume a 9%, and we could budget a 9% increase, and if we don't make it, then we got to hit them with the taxes anyway. So this is kind of like truth in returning. If they happen to make their numbers, they do spectacular, then we don't have to raise the contribution or raise it less because we have to do this long range. We owe the money. So the second one is the hard place. The first one is the rock. So that's all I got. Oh, and one more thing. I think this is so well done. If we could get staff, if we could get Doug up, I complimented the write-up on the lead situation with the water. I think this would be a good 15-minute presentation as well to forewarn the public of what's coming down tax-wise. Thanks.
I'd like to do more than warn. I'd like to do something to mitigate it.
Well, I kind of agree with Mr. Walding there that we really can't do much about the public safety pension, and the stormwater is something that we are still deciding on, and the police station, I'm not ready to give that up.
You can't do it for less than $600,000.
No. So I feel like that it kind of needs to be done.
The only way that I see to reduce the number is to reduce our commitment to funding stormwater, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Yeah, I'm not
Because I will fight to the death that $1 in stormwater utility and $1 in property taxes is $1 out of our citizens' pocket, and they're equal. So that's why we need to ask the community which they wish to pay. That's why we're having the referendum.
Could I just comment on that? I think this last, clearly this is, you look at these numbers and it's just like, I feel like as a taxpayer, I just look at it and almost like roll my eyes, like, oh my God, more of the same, right? The tax is going up, and it's disheartening. So that's the initial reaction, and then I look back at these bullet points, and I think there's a little bit of a story that I think does need to be told. You do have that third bullet point, as Commissioner Waldeck said. This is really part of the reason we're considering referendum questions is to ask the public. He is right. Whether it's out of the property tax or whether the stormwater utility people are paying it, so that if you're looking at the net cost to the taxpayer, the net cost is really not changing significantly now. Granted, there's some change, this and that. Right, and I would personally pay less, but some would pay more. Various comments and things of that we could get into. But ultimately, I view that as we're gonna allow, given the important public nature of this question, and the fact that people have had experience under both systems, as the mayor has pointed out numerous times, we're gonna throw this question to the public and really get some feedback before we make any decisions. And so I think that's really important, and I think we're allowing that appropriate public input, because this is an important question, and clearly the mayor and I may view it differently on the merits of the question, but I think no doubt about it, this is a question that's worthwhile for people to think about. When we get to the public safety pensions, I mean, I think when I look at this, it again points out every time these numbers come out and these numbers are discussed, the need for public safety pension reform becomes clearer to me. Unfortunately, the 7 of us here don't have the authority or the ability to make those decisions, and in a gridlocked Springfield that we seem to have, I'm not hopeful that anyone is going to see any sort of benefit or large ability to make any significant changes to public safety pensions. I'm not anticipating it, and we do need to fund as required. I mean, that's
Well,
what we need to make.
we're all complaining about the numbers up there, but I'd like to hear more about the strategies, about things that we can possibly do. And I wasn't suggesting we're not going to ask the referendum questions. I'm just suggesting that I think we might want to think about the timing of when things get impacted and making changes. Because I would disagree about the way the way that it's distributed. It's a fact that under a property tax system, there's a disproportionate burden paid by the single-family residences, as opposed to under a stormwater utility fee. And to have that increase exacerbated by any kind of shift, I think is going to hit typical household more than necessary. I'm saying if they're going to do that, fine, but if you're going to do it the same year when some of these other things come down the pipeline, I think you're going to get more people rolling their eyes. That's my point. I think you're going to be rolling something else.
And I think we can, once we have the referendum questions, we can continue to,
Fine.
we can continue to discuss that and have those results. And perhaps the result is that people want to see it exactly the same as it is, and there'll be no change and no decisions had to be made on timing of it. But if people are overwhelmingly saying that we should return to the property tax levy, then I think that's also an important piece.
Timing is a question.
And timing will be a question. Just one final comment before I conclude my remarks on this point. The police station improvements, what we've said all along, what I've said all along in this, is that I've wanted to find a solution that we're able to make necessary improvements without making major impact to the taxpayer. And the reason that we've set the budget, the reason that the budget was established in the first place, was in order to capitalize on the fact of this timing, the fact that this bond issuance is rolling off, and we're able to make this needed improvement without a material impact on the overall picture. So, I think that it's certainly a challenge. You get into the line items and argue about the line items and what line is what. But we've talked about this all along, and it's a way that I established the budget, and I have been continually encouraging staff to challenge the budget and challenge the assumptions to bring that down and to bring that number into perhaps that number can come down slightly as we go through some of the design phases, but would further encourage staff on that point. But it is something that we need to do to ensure that we're able to provide the first-class public safety services that the community does expect.
Bob?
I think we're kind of tap dancing around stuff here, guys. Timing, next year's not going to be great timing. Does anybody believe, based on stormwater expectations of public safety pensions, that 2 years from now is going to be better timing? Anybody? Want to put that out there?
Not me.
We're kind of acting like we only have these three things to consider. We spend a lot of money on a lot of things. And I remember a couple of years ago, we had a budget meeting over at Fire Station 2 where I was whining then, like I often do, about sustainability. Martin, I think you were in on that conversation as well. We don't have sustainability unless we mean by sustainability $1 million or so every year increase in property taxes. And so I think that what this is telling us is that we really need to have really serious conversations about service levels. We sit here and say we want to fund stormwater because you can't hardly live in Downers Grove and say, I don't want to fund stormwater, right? Because it's flooding everywhere. But it is $3.9 million a year. You can't really sit here and say we want to provide top quality public services and then say you don't really want to have Fire Station 1 open anymore. But you know what? It's part of what we choose to spend money on every year. And if we're going to get $800 to $1.3 million of public safety pensions over the next 3 years, likely between $300 and $500 a year for the foreseeable future, and we know we've got existing things to maintain, and those costs go up as well, I think we got to start having conversations that go way beyond the three things on the board where we look and say, oh, public safety pensions, we can't do anything about it. Well, obviously. But we can do something about another $40 million worth of spending decisions. Not all of it, obviously. But a lot of it we could adjust. And I don't think we're doing all we can do. We're working as hard as we say we're working, unless we're really getting into those kinds of conversations. I'm ready to have it if anybody else will join me. But this is not going to get all of a sudden a lot better or a lot less pressure. It's just going to continue to grow at this kind of a rate.
Okay. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to be too repetitive. I'm always willing to engage in a conversation, whether it's on service levels or any other topic. So if the rest of the council is, let's have it. And I look forward to the budget discussion in October, November. As has been said, the police station has to get done. I think I'm on record saying it's not a perfect plan, but it does what we needed to do for the moment. And I think that's very important because the police station has been deplorable for longer than I care to mention. With regard to the public safety pensions, yes, it's all controlled by Springfield. But I think we need to remember, and I think it's worth saying, and I know I see it up here under the key facts, although we haven't gotten to it yet, that we always do make the contributions as a village that are required to be made into the fund. We don't miss a payment. Some other folks do. Downers Grove does not. I think that's important to say. And I think it's important also to remember that our employees are putting into these funds their own money as well out of their checks, and that they take an awful lot of risks on our behalf and sometimes pay the price for that. So yes, public safety funding, public safety pensions is an issue. Yes, the issue has to be solved in Springfield, but thanks to all those who are earning those pensions.
See, and I want to follow up on that. Public safety pensions, these are actuarial contributions towards future liability. It's like putting money into your mortgage escrow account. So basically, pay now or pay later, but it's going to be, it's basically going to our basic liabilities.
Well, if you get a good investment return, it's also cheaper to pay now.
Yeah, well, that's why that's my thing. And
So what if we
We
said,
talked about this.
without rehashing the police station discussion, that $600,000 is $600,000 of cost to the taxpayers that could otherwise be going away. The pension contributions, we're going to make those. I mean, I don't hear anybody suggesting ever in the time that I've been sitting up here that we're going to somehow try and avoid making those. But you're looking at somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million a year of costs that are kind of not beyond our control, but they're things that are getting foisted upon us. What if we said that between now and when we get serious about the budget, we were looking for some input from our village staff team on how to find another $1 million of service level cuts that we could make to offset it? We wouldn't have to make them, obviously. But if we don't sort of get into that, we just kind of kick the general concept around, and then all of a sudden it's budget time, we're not going to be prepared to to have those kinds, that's a way longer conversation than 4 or 5 budget meetings between, October and November.
Well, to really get into that conversation, I don't think we want to go back to the days of find $500,000 in the budget you can trim out, find $1 million, some arbitrary number. What you really have to start talking about is what are fundamental services that we deliver that if they were eliminated, they would achieve those kinds of savings. Not go find me a few nickels here and a few nickels there that add up to some number. That doesn't really get you anywhere. You're literally talking, because first of all, that's only on a 1-year basis.
Oh, sure.
To really do that, you're talking about not doing something or doing something differently, or have somebody else do it.
Right.
That on a long-term basis would fundamentally change one of the costs in this village of that magnitude.
You're right, absolutely.
That's what the real question is.
Totally agree.
And if there are suggestions as to what those are, I would encourage everybody to speak up and put them on the table. Because historically, there's been a lot of gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands. But when it comes to it, I rarely hear actually the suggestions.
Well, there's actually a very good reason for that, which is that nobody wants to pay taxes and nobody wants their services cut.
It's also called have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly. And then, so as a consequence, proposing significant service cuts would be very politically unpopular.
Well,
And raising taxes is politically
not
unpopular.
necessarily a cut.
Well, eliminating.
That's why we're here.
Or outsourcing.
Well, if it's really cheaper, or it's just sort of phony cheaper.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to segue right into the other issue, because
Yes,
we're talking
strategies.
about it right now. The second issue we've identified has to do, again, with public safety pensions and other post-employment benefits, which is really the provision of required health benefits to retired employees. Let's start over here where the council was just talking about public safety pensions. The issue is simple, it's already been stated. The unfunded liability for the village continues to go up, and the percent funded measure, one of many measures of health of the pension funds, have tended to be flat or gone down, even as we as a village have contributed more and more money to these funds. So unfunded liability is going up, percent funded is flat or declining, and that issue may affect our bond rating going forward. Some key facts I think have already been stated. The benefits and the rules of the pension funds are set by the state. The village makes all the required contributions and has for as long as any staff member here can remember or was able to look up. We have always made our required contributions. In 2012, the state made some changes to contribution requirements. Since that time, 2013 and beyond, the village has contributed slightly more than the minimum required each year. And that is because the minimum target for percent funded at the state level is you're aiming for a 90% funded level at the end of the day. Well, it didn't make sense for our pension boards or our council to aim for 90%. We are on track for 100% funding. So we make a little bit more than the minimum contribution each year with a 100% target as our goal. I've already said that the percent funded has declined. Okay, so what can we do about this issue? There's two very simple things to write on a board, and they can be very difficult decisions, as Commissioner White stated. One is we could simply put more money into it. As a strategy, make more than the contributions we're already making in an effort to reduce the amount of unfunded liability. That really just puts more pressure over here. The other issue is what Commissioner Barnett and others were just talking about, and that is, should we be considering changes to staffing levels and service levels related to our very valued public safety employees? That's exactly what the council was talking about here. Why is this the strategy? Because every other aspect of this issue is really beyond our control. It's either controlled by the state or it's controlled by the general labor market. We're not really going to pay, nor should we pay, our public safety employees less in the market. That's not how we roll. We wouldn't suggest that in the first place. And we certainly wouldn't suggest not following the state rules. So what's left? How many people we have? What types of services they're providing? So that's the issue related to public safety pensions and how it may affect our bond rating moving forward. This is a different issue, but it's going to sound exactly like the public safety pension issue. This is the OPEB, other post-employment benefits. I'm going to start here with the key facts because a lot of us may be not familiar with this concept. All municipalities in the state are required to provide health benefits to retired employees. That's a requirement of the state that we do that, and we're happy to do so. That means we have retired employees on our health insurance plan. OPEB, other post-employment benefits, that liability is the difference between the village's cost of providing those benefits, the claims experience, if you will, and how much those retirees are contributing in aggregate to the fund. If you think about retirees as a group, even though they're paying 100% of the required premiums into our plan, the cost of the services, the claims, the benefits we pay out on their behalf almost always exceed the contributions we get in. And so what's going on here is we have to go through an actuarial calculation to determine what the village's liability is. What is our liability now for that future cost, the difference between the cost of providing the service and what these employees, our retired employees, are paying us? Why is this an issue now? Because the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB as Judy refers to it, has a pronouncement that says you have to calculate this on an actuarial basis, just like pensions. We have to do that now, and it shows up in our financial reports. And in 2 years, those liabilities will actually flow through our financial, our audit. And so the liabilities would become very measurable and very real and will affect our bottom line. A side note, there's another driver of cost that really has become noticed in the last couple of years, and that is what we refer to as PSEBA, Public Safety Employee Benefit Act. This is a state law that requires us to provide health insurance for our team members in public safety that have become disabled and unable to work, have suffered a catastrophic injury while working in that capacity. The provision of those post-employment benefits, the liability on the village side has increased by $3 million in the last 2 years. And it looks like that will continue to go up. So our issue here sounds very similar to what we've just been talking about. Our unfunded liability, which has now been calculated at $11 million and growing, will appear in our future financial reports or audits, and also may affect our bond rating moving forward. What are the strategies here? Well, the first thing is we could consider treating OPEB exactly like we treat pensions. Set up a fund, a trust fund, where the village contributes money to try to set aside money now for the future liability costs. Treat it just like a pension fund. The other concept is this. Consider changing employee and village contributions to cover the cost of OPEB now. So all of our employees pay premiums for their health benefits. The concept here is not only will the village make a contribution to this fund while the employees are still working here, but the employees, part of their premium would be labeled and segregated as a contribution within this fund for OPEB. So if I pay a premium, X dollars of it would go towards the benefits while I'm working, and another portion of it would be labeled and distributed into the OPEB fund. Any way you look at this, this is village and employee dollars going into a fund now.
On that last point, are there any other communities that are doing that?
I believe we have identified Aurora as the only one in Illinois that we're aware of that's doing it. They had an extremely large OPEB liability, and they immediately started up this concept. We have talked to other communities that are right where we are because of the change in the GASB pronouncements, that they're looking at it right now as a strategy. So on that happy note, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, and see if the council has any comments or questions on these two issues.
Well, I appreciate you coming up with some strategies. It would be probably helpful, not tonight, but probably helpful to see how they pan out in some more detail. What some would call spreadsheet them out for us. We kind of see how they are expected to play out in terms of the finances. Appreciate you having something under the strategies line. Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. Just for what it's worth, these two strategies, the trust fund and then the changes to contribution amounts, are exactly what I'm seeing in the private sector. I've got several clients that do it exactly that way for retiree health coverage.
And I know that there's been annual attempts, if not annual, close to it, on PSEBA to get some better clarification around the definition of catastrophic, which drives some of these numbers. I know that legislation has been introduced not every year, every other year, and it just hasn't gone very far.
The federal or state legislation?
State legislation to actually mirror the federal definition of catastrophic injury for purposes of defining the liability.
I think it was about a year ago when we had a similar conversation, and one of the things I had asked, and maybe you can review it on the pension side. For example, when we hire a new police officer at about $55,000 somewhere, and I'm sure these numbers change, we almost have to assume that it's a $2 million liability over the life. And so looking at what's coming, and I know you probably included some of that earlier, but if we could review that and say, when people say we need more police officers, well, this is what it's going to cost. It's not the $55,000 a year. It's going to be a $2.5 million investment over time. The other thing is, I wonder when you talk about employee contributions and seeing it in the private sector as well, that's all well and good, but when you get into labor negotiations and what you're going to pay and all that, what the concern is on part of the employee is, how much do I take home to my family? How much food can I have? Can I get a car? All these, the day-to-day living expenses. And so when they're negotiating, it's kind of a separate thing of how much we're gonna contribute and how much do we get to keep. And that's really part, eventually you wind up catching up.
Exactly.
So that so that the people you're paying can actually live a life and not just plan their future death or future illnesses. And then again, we're all supposedly living longer. I guess that's the only good news we can take out of this, is that we can all expect to live longer, right?
Pay taxes longer?
Well, that's the other side of it.
Commissioner, we'll put that information in the spreadsheets that Mayor Tully has asked for.
Thanks.
Could I just comment?
Yes, you
on
can.
that? The unfortunate part about all this is that, I view, from my perspective, when I look at, Commissioner Barnett brought up the point of, what about bringing up something that on an ongoing basis would save taxpayers significant amounts of money, like that it would affect this, not, we're going to delay this project this year, but then we're going to do it next year. Well, that doesn't save any money, because that's
It's
just
actually costing you more.
perhaps it costs more, the same or more. So that's not saving money, but what is going to save money on an ongoing basis? And that's really what I'm most interested in.
One is fundamentally changing a service on an ongoing basis that's no longer being provided. Two, finding out how to provide the same service through alternative means such as outsourcing or consolidation or partnering. Those are the ways that you can do it.
And I think those are the things where, unfortunately, I think we really do need to spend some focus on. I mean,
yeah, well, that's why I think we had as our high priority, or whatever we do, medium. There's no such thing as a low priority. Well, everything's a high priority action item. Major consolidation. We happen to have one that we're currently discussing, but I think that should be an ongoing priority action item, perhaps not even a priority item, but and we should always be looking for those opportunities, because that's how you achieve immediate savings. By figuring out another way to do it at a lower, yes, it has to be done at a lower cost, but another way to do it, whether you maintain the service level long-term in a sustainable way without avoiding a lot of increases, or eliminating or sharing that cost with somebody else.
I mean, I really believe that a lot of, we're looking at this here today, and everyone's just like, oh, this is horrible. And there's nothing, all these things, it's not, we're not going to defund stormwater, we're not going to defund the police station, we're not going to defund public safety pensions, right? We're committed to do those things, but what can we do? And I think that we've really, this consolidation piece, that's been bandied around a lot in political circles recently. I feel like it's thrown around very frequently, and we're going to consolidate mosquito districts or something or other. Okay, well, we're not saving any money, because we're just moving around legal
Well,
structures.
And yes, but there are things that can be done. For example, if you have 32 units of government within DuPage County all doing independent mosquito abatement contracts, and you find a way through collective or group contracting to reduce the overall cost of everybody, you can actually save some money. You don't need to consolidate district political bodies to do that. But there are,
I
it's not
agree.
just consolidation, it's cooperation, collaboration, consolidation, different flavors of that ice cream can, in some instances, achieve great benefits. One of the things we want to keep in mind is from a legislative strategy is not only encouraging people to work on this other stuff that's causing us a migraine headache, but to encourage that barriers to cooperation, consolidation, these other things are reduced. As we know from our experience with the elimination of the Fairview Avenue Fire Protection District, there were all kinds of hurdles that you had to jump through in order to make that happen. Why should it be so difficult? When you can see an obvious opportunity to save money, why should there be 17 legislative hurdles to get through?
For the taxpayers of the village of Downers Grove.
Yes.
Saves
But I
them
mean,
because we
but
we
in the-
were subsidizing
Yeah, no,
them.
it was a logical thing to do. Totally,
Right.
but in the aggregate, the taxpayers in the aggregate didn't really save a dime by doing that.
Taxpayers in Downers Grove did, because they got the service paid.
But
Yeah, exactly.
Bill.
It was prudent, but it didn't reduce the cost of government.
well, right, because it's
It
not
more
like
fairly shifted it around.
right. It's not like
But
we
the overall
closed
cost is the
it's
same.
not like we closed a fire station or eliminated employees.
But for the people involved, it was a
Oh,
savings.
no. But it doesn't reduce the cost of government. It does,
But-
it's a more equitable way of funding it,
In
absolutely.
that case, the reduction in the cost of government actually occurred in the 60s or 70s when we started providing that service in a cooperative way.
My point wasn't that
$1,000 a year in the organizational.
my point wasn't that was a saving example. My point was that was a
Example of-
trying to eliminate a unit of government, and there were all sorts of legislative hurdles to get to it. One of the things that we can ask our representatives to do is to help eliminate barriers to when these ideas come up that do save money and reduce the cost of government, that we're able to act upon them.
Those hurdles, though, are, I mean, I'm not horribly marked, you couldn't be more right on that, but I think the prudent thing for this body to do in the 3 to 5 to 7 year range is assume that the same people that aren't willing to make any changes on the pension rules are the same people that are probably in a big hurry to get out of the way.
Not necessarily, because these things are atomic bombs when people talk about it. Some of the other stuff, sometimes you can do it. Anyway, that's a side point. This is a side point.
The thing we
My
got-
main issue is we have to look at outsourcing possibilities. We have to look at, and if there's going to be some long-term sustainable savings, you're really talking about discontinuing a service, not trying to find a few nickels here and there.
That's true.
Or finding a different way to provide that service than we currently are now in some kind of other fashion, which means partnering or consolidation, collaboration, whatever you want to call it. Extreme example alert. There is a county or a town in Georgia, which was formed not that long ago, certainly 1932. But I believe they have something ridiculous like 3 or 4 employees. Almost every single service is outsourced. I met the mayor of that town, and he's one of the, I don't think he's even one of the employees. And everything's done by outsourcing. Now, there's an extreme example. I'm not suggesting that. So take that away from the headline about the deprioritizing ethics. But my point is that if we're really going to be serious about this, we have to be open and creative, and we also have to be willing to take some of the feedback we're going to get on that topic.
Those 2 headlines in one day.
That percent thing is telling. You know, it doesn't point to any solutions, to be sure, but 4%, 39 is a little nutty, but if you just said 4 to 7, if you were expecting 4 to 7 for the foreseeable future, you're expecting cost of providing services that outpaces inflation and likely outpaces income growth for the residents paying those bills. And that's a danger. That's a curve that has not got a happy ending for anybody. And so it doesn't. You're exactly right. We need to start getting specific with some ideas, and this isn't one of those. But have it in our heads, those numbers, those levy numbers. Maybe we'll get some big sales tax. Maybe there'll be a big income tax increase in Illinois. We'll get a bigger nut, but we need to sort of have in our head that those operational cost numbers, we need to be figuring out how to keep those things at or near inflation levels.
Right.
As a target, as a goal.
Well, yeah, obviously we need to focus on revenue opportunities too. I'm not suggesting that we raise taxes, but when there are opportunities to redirect something that we could do, I think we have to consider them.
one of the things that we do well that's been recognized by rating agencies over the last year, approaching a decade or more, is that we manage these issues very well. We get out in front of them, we have public discussions. Sometimes they can be a little scary, sometimes they can be a little nerve-wracking. But we've proven that we actually take these issues and put them into action. And you can see them in our budgets, and you can see them in our accomplishments each year. So from a staff perspective, so far what we've done tonight is create the awareness that we wanted to create, not only for the council, because we've briefed them individually prior to tonight, but more importantly for the community, that if these things come up and if these conversations are happening, that they understand. Maybe they've seen the video about pensions and the struggles. And so when that budget message comes out in September, if there's anything like this in here, we've already addressed it and we know what the conversation's about. So from a staff perspective, just based on what we've heard tonight from the council, this is very encouraging. What we're hearing is go ahead and start exploring, really more accurately, continue to explore the things we've always been doing. Look for these opportunities to move forward.
Yes, and obviously we all want to see more. Thank you. We want to see more about the strategies, the details. And I was going to come back and make sure that there was a word outcome over here, that you got what you expected to accomplish tonight.
Yes.
But we also, of course, need to continue to be focused on revenue generation. I know there's some people at this table that is a very high priority, but I think it also needs people to understand the importance of economic development and of bringing, expanding the tax base
Yes.
so we can
Yes.
try to keep down some of the rates here. It's not a static environment, it's a dynamic environment, and we have to work hard at that, as well as manage the expense side. It's not just one or the other, it's both.
It would be not fun to have to add to that side on the left, TIF coverage.
Exactly.
That would be not very fun.
That would not be fun.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Mayor, we've received all the direction and discussion that we find valuable.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was just part one. We're going to do part two next? All right, well, if there's nothing else that you need from us, and anyone else doesn't want to add any comments, I was going to turn it over to the audience for any comments or input. Good evening.
John Kaluska. A couple of things. The $3.9 million stormwater figure, I recall that's been around for about 2 years, that number. I think that was the last council's number. I don't remember this council having a discussion on what they thought was the appropriate funding level for the entire stormwater operation and maintenance capital. You may in fact think it should be 2.9 or 5.9.
Some of us think it's underfunded.
But
We don't know.
But we're gonna discuss
We did
that.
have that
It
discussion.
was 2 stormwater utility meetings ago. I want to say the April meeting, where that was actually one of the key pieces of direction that came out of the council, was after a thorough analysis and discussion of the plan, the council directed 3.9.
We can look forward to that being this council's decision going forward.
Yes, sir.
Next question, kind of follow up on Commissioner Walbeck. Has the staff done any projections on when the increase in population density is going to trigger the need to hire more first responders? And I believe it's like every 1,000 increase, you need to hire 1 person. Or is that one shift that you have to hire 3 people?
So the study that I think you're referring to, of a certain amount of public safety and first responders per X thousands of employees, that's really based on an assumption that those population expansions are happening as a growth outward. We're experiencing a growth inward, and so we're covering the same geographic territory with more density. What it does is it changes the mix of types of first responses in most cases. Yes, there's some increase, but it's really, especially on the fire and EMS side, it really ends up being a shift to more EMS. We monitor these demands for services on a regular basis, and in fact, we've been briefing the council on some trends offline that may surface in the coming years. It's really this discussion. What does our fire department look like in 5 years and 10 years, and why? On the police side, we've been doing this very thorough analysis for several years. We've shifted resources within to move the police responses to the demand for service we've had. So without going back a couple of years and talking about that, the answer is yes. And we don't see right now an increase in staffing. We see a redistribution of what those first responders are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Other comments, questions from our guests? Well, thank you for joining us. We will, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you and good night. Happy Flag Day.